wanted to move on to the continuing McCarthyism and downright propaganda against Tulsi Gabbard. Here is Tulsi Gabbard on Morning Joe. These wonderful people at Morning Joe.
I wanted to ask Congresswoman Gabbard, you brought a very interesting guest last night to the State of the Union.
Yes.
A prominent Syrian politician who's part of the group we've been allying with in northeast Syria that's been keeping the peace there. And I'm wondering what you told this Syrian politician about what's ahead for them and as the American troops begin to pull out. Are they at risk of being slaughtered in those areas? And what should we do about it?
Well, I think more importantly, I heard from her their concerns about Turkey's threats. Knowing that if there is a pullout of U.S. troops overnight and it's too hasty, then the Kurds, who have been our most effective fighting force against ISIS in Syria, will be left to Turkey's slaughter. She referred to what has already happened in places like Afrin in Syria to know what would lie ahead if there is not an opportunity for the Kurds in the northern part of Syria to broker some form of security agreement that will allow them to, frankly, protect their homes and protect their families going forward. She also said, we never expected the United States to keep soldiers there forever. They always knew it would be a temporary situation focused on fighting against ISIS. All she's saying is give us the space to be able to make sure that we are able to secure ourselves before the United States pulls out all of our troops.
Did she ask you why you met with Assad?
No, she didn't. But we had a discussion about that, and she recognized why I met with him and agreed with that meeting, because she knows how important it is that we be willing to meet with adversaries or potential adversaries, not just our friends.
Do you think Assad is our enemy?
If we're serious about the pursuit of peace.
Do you think Assad is our enemy?
Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria poses a direct threat to the United States.
What do you say to Democratic voters who watched you go over there, and what do you say to military members who have been deployed repeatedly in Syria, pushing back against Assad?
People who have been deployed to Syria have been there focused on their mission, which has been to defeat ISIS. Our troops have not gone to Syria to wage yet another costly, destructive regime change war. And many troops I hear from express frustration at the fact that our country continues to wage senseless, costly regime change wars, followed by nation-building missions, leading to situations like we see in Afghanistan. So many examples of our troops being deployed, their lives put on the line, without understanding what the clear mission or objective is and how that mission actually serves the security of the American people in the United States.
What's so funny, did you see all of them looking at her? Wait, can I find that again? Hold on. Oh, their animosity. Look at them. They can't take it. Who is this? Who is this woman talking about regime change and challenging our empire? How dare she?
Which I think a lot of Americans would agree with you there. But again, going back to Assad, Assad is not an enemy. Is he an adversary of the United States?
We have to look to who poses a threat to the United States and the American people.
I understand that, but there are a lot of people who don't pose a direct military threat to the United States who consider themselves to be adversaries of the United States. Vladimir Putin poses or considers America to be an enemy. We consider Russia to be an adversary. I'm just asking you, do you consider Assad to be an adversary of the United States?
When I look at whether it's Syria or Turkey or Russia or China or other countries in the world, I look at what are their interests and are their interests counter to our interests.
So what would you say he is to the United States? If you cannot say that he's an adversary or an enemy, what is Assad to the U.S.? What is the word?
I'll play the rest of the clip. I'll play the rest of the clip. But you know what this reminds me of? You know what this reminds me of? You know, when I was in college, right? I was dating somebody, and you know, I was kind of on the fence a little bit. I was kind of on the fence. You know, I did love her, but I didn't know if I was like in love. You know, have you ever had that where you like love somebody and you're attracted to them? But, like, are you in love? Do you even know what in love means? But I want to be with the person. I just don't know if I'm in love. But, you know, she said to me, like, well, you know, do you love me? Are you in love with me, or do you love me? Do you love me, or are you in love with me? And, you know, as I grew, I understand the difference. But this is like, they're trying to get her to be so declarative and pledge your allegiance to the United Empire of America, or the United States of Empire. And they're trying to get her so strongly. You can't be a part of that club if you don't pledge to want to, you know, be at 20 different wars at one time and dip our toe into every other country known to man. And Tulsi Gabbard, you know, they can't stand nuance. They can't stand diplomacy. They can't stand not declaring every foreign. They can't stand not declaring every untoward or foreign leader that's terrible or brutal our enemy. Well, I've never heard any of them challenging any politician on their show to say, do you consider Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia our enemy? Or the King of Jordan our enemy? Or frankly, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel our enemy? And some of the right-wing dictator authoritarian things he's been doing? Can't stand it.
You can describe it however you want to describe it.
I want to know how you describe it.
My point is that whether it is Syria or any of these other countries, we need to look at how their interests are counter to or aligned with ours.
Are interests aligned with ours?
What are Assad's interests?
Assad seems interested in the slaughter primarily of his own people, in part. I mean, how does that line up? Survival, yes.
Exactly.
Well, he also
and he seems to be willing to go to great ends to do that.
He also uses weapons of mass destruction on his
adversary
as well.
I mean, we can talk about all these things. My point here is...
Is it important to talk about these things? That he uses chemical weapons on his own people?
Of course, of course. It's important to talk about how our military is being used, what it is costing them, what it is costing the American people, and whether or not those missions, those objectives serve the security of the United States and the American people.
I want to ask you...
I mean, if you don't go along with their line, forget it. And then, you know, I had a little, I don't think she responded to me, but I had a little tweet, because Casey Hunt, who was that smug, quote-unquote, reporter out there, you know, saying, you know, did your guest ask you why you went to meet with President Bashar al-Assad? She's up there saying, here's NBC News' excellent reporting on the Russian machine that now appears to be boosting Tulsi Gabbard. You know, she's referencing the totally ridiculous NBC News story that essentially says that RT America and Sputnik has done a bunch of stories on Tulsi Gabbard, so that means that Russia is working to get Tulsi Gabbard elected. They also used research from New Knowledge, the cybersecurity firm that literally has been kicked off Facebook. Its founder has been kicked off Facebook because they were caught meddling, love that word, meddling in the Alabama Senate election. So NBC News, this is totally crazy. And here's the link, by the way, if you want to read this story, if you don't know what I'm talking about. Glenn Greenwald did some great work exposing this. But NBC News literally wrote a report claiming Russia supports Tulsi Gabbard, relying on a firm just caught fabricating Russia data for the Democratic Party. Like, you can't make this up. And you have that idiot, Casey Hunt, you know, challenging Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, in the past has called Bashar al-Assad a brutal dictator. She has called him a brutal dictator. But you know what? The United States is in bed with a hell of a lot of brutal dictators. The brutal dictators we like are the ones that will give us their oil, give us their natural resources. The brutal dictators we do not like are those who won't and are compete with our business interests. That's the difference. pro-brutal dictator that gives us the oil and their natural resources and is good for American business, anti-brutal dictator who's not. All brutal dictators. I mean, I think Assad is a brutal dictator. But why is it that we're so upset about Assad, not Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's responsible for a genocide in Yemen? Tens of thousands of people dying in Yemen. We're cool with that. The only reason we weren't cool with that is not because of what he's doing in Yemen, but because an elite Washington Post journalist was executed by the Crown Prince. Before that, not a peep about the genocide going on in Yemen. It's truly remarkable because, as I tweeted, let me find my own tweet, showing this little diagram or pentagon or square. I don't know. What shape is that? A pentagon? I wasn't good in that class. So do you notice they have a bunch of candidates who haven't even announced yet? Love Bernie, but hasn't even announced. Beto O'Rourke hasn't announced, even though him and Oprah were playing patty cake yesterday in an interview. Joe Biden hasn't announced. Bloomberg hasn't announced. Amy Klobuchar hasn't announced. Elizabeth Warren hasn't formally announced. Sherrod Brown hasn't formally announced. So they got all of these quote-unquote 2020 candidates. Who's missing there? I mean, if this isn't what Noam Chomsky talks about, manufacturing consent. Or in this case, manufacturing disconsent. You don't have to like Tulsi Gabbard, but she's a declared candidate. She's a congresswoman of the United States. And you don't? She's not included? What is this that they like to say? Picking winners and losers? I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting what they're doing. Hey, if you want to have an actual debate as a media outlet on regime change, on whether the United States should be getting involved with all these other countries and trying to topple dictators and all this stuff, great. Let's have that debate. I think it's a good debate to have. But when you have this smorgasbord of overpaid, elite, cocktail crowd idiots on the panel of Morning Joe trying to gang up on a congresswoman who's had the bravery, the courage to say, you know what? I'm going to go talk to President Bashar al-Assad. I'm going to try and encourage a political resolution because there is no military solution in Syria and there's no military solution in Saudi Arabia and Yemen or any of those places. There never was. But, she's propping up a dictator. Meanwhile, David Ignatius, who basically works for the CIA and just pretends to be a Washington Post columnist, never heard a CIA talking point he never regurgitated in print. He's on there asking her questions. He cheerleaded for Iraq. He cheerleaded for Syria. He cheerleads for every war. Same thing with Morning Joe. They love war. Never challenged war. And they've been down with this new McCarthyism against Russia too. And trying to make Tulsi Gabbard and Glenn Greenwald and anybody who questions this escalation of with a nuclear power as puppets of Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's number one, it's dangerous what they're doing, and frankly, it's un-American. I wasn't around for McCarthyism, but this definitely is the new McCarthyism. And how does somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who I can't get in her head, but I'm assuming she knows it's an uphill climb for her to get the Democratic nomination or become president, but she wants to get her ideas in a debate. But how do you even get your ideas? How do you even get on the debate stage if the media is, I just showed you, literally working to make it that people don't even know you're running, to cancel you out as a candidate? You're not featured in stories written on CNN. You're painted as an Assad apologist, or you're painted, as being propped up by Russia.